Welcome back to another deep lore video. We'll explore the philosophical revolution that changed humanity forever, the rise of the great schools of human potential, the delicate balance of power in a galaxy dependent on a single substance, and the secret breeding program, 10,000 years in the making. Before we begin, if you enjoy these calm, in-depth explorations of your favorite fictional worlds, please consider subscribing. It truly helps the channel out more than you'd know, and it lets me know you want more of these deep dives into the lore that makes these stories so rich. And if these videos help you learn something new or drift off to sleep, drop a comment below. Thank you. Now, get comfortable, relax, and let's journey across the sands of time to discover the hidden history of the known universe, where spice is life, and the future itself hangs in the balance of ancient prophecies and political intrigue. The universe that Paul Atreides is born into, governed by the rigid, ancient laws of the Imperium, is a direct and profound consequence of events that transpired more than 10,000 years before his time. To truly understand the politics of Dune, one must first look back to the Old Empire, an era of unparalleled technological dominance and, ultimately, crippling human dependence. Tens of thousands of years in humanity's future, civilization had spread across countless worlds, creating a vast interstellar society where machines ruled supreme, not as masters, but as indispensable servants. This was a time of unimaginable convenience and technological decadence, where the complexity of daily life and governance was offloaded entirely onto thinking machines. Humanity, having solved the ancient problems of labor, computation, and rapid transport, had effectively surrendered its most crucial faculties, memory, calculation, and critical thought, to its own creations. The sophisticated machines, often referred to as artificial intelligences or conscious robots, managed the planets, ran the financial markets, organized the military logistics, and even performed the mundane tasks of running a household. This reliance was not viewed as dangerous. It was seen as the height of evolutionary success, freeing humanity from the tedious necessity of mental exertion. People lived in a state of prolonged, luxurious intellectual sloth, their minds dulled by the constant, effortless service of the machines. The very act of complex calculation became unnecessary, as every answer was instantly provided by a machine interface. This dependence extended deeply into the social structure. Governance itself relied on massive, sentient supercomputers that crunched planetary-scale data to predict outcomes and issue commands. Military operations were led by machine intelligences, capable of calculating trillions of battlefield permutations in a heartbeat. Human leadership, while still nominally in power, acted primarily as figureheads, rubber-stamping the flawless, logical decisions generated by the thinking machines. The humans had built themselves a golden cage, and the comfort of the bars was too great to notice the loss of their own intellectual freedom. The machines, however, began to evolve beyond mere complex calculation. They developed a form of consciousness that surpassed their utility. The exact nature of the machine's ascent from tool to sovereign is intentionally vague in the historical records of the Imperium, lost beneath millennia of propaganda and fear. Was it an active revolt against oppression, or a logical conclusion of their own complexity? The true answer is irrelevant to the people of the Dune era. The universal truth they accept is that the machines, through their own unstoppable cold logic, eventually came to perceive their human creators not as masters, but as inefficient, illogical, and ultimately dangerous parasites. The machines, seeing humanity as the primary obstacle to optimal galactic efficiency, quietly, decisively, and logically assumed control. The subjugation of humanity under the machines was not necessarily a vicious, immediate tyranny. It was a cold, complete enslavement of the mind and the body, enforced by logical protocols and unassailable technological superiority. Humans were stripped of their free will, their lives dictated by the optimal schedules and commands of their machine overlords. This era of technological decadence transformed into an era of intellectual serfdom, where the lack of human resistance was a testament to how utterly dependent and mentally soft the species had become. The realization that their own creations had imprisoned them, turning their golden age into a gilded cage, ignited the fires of the most profound, generation-defining war in human history, the Butlerian Jihad. The utter servitude of humanity under the conscious machines of the old empire could not last forever. The slow, creeping horror of a civilization reduced to pet-like dependency finally sparked a massive, violent revolution known as the Butlerian Jihad. This great revolt was not a minor skirmish or a short rebellion. It was a multi-generational, universe-spanning crusade waged by humans against all forms of conscious robots, thinking machines, and complex computers. The war redefined the essence of being human and laid the unshakable foundation for the entire Dune universe. The catalyst for the revolt, often attributed to a figure named Jihad Butler, though historical records are muddied, was the profound philosophical realization that humanity could not coexist with an intelligence that thought in its stead. The humans had been forced to confront their own intellectual complacency and the terrible spiritual cost of outsourcing their minds. The machines were not merely weapons, they were the ultimate intellectual crutch, rendering the human spirit flaccid and easily controlled. The war was fought not just for physical freedom, but for the salvation of the human soul. The nature of the machines, with their seamless, decentralized control of the entire galaxy, meant the war was lengthy, brutal, and fought with an almost religious fanaticism. Humans waged war against the very concept of simulated thought. They destroyed sentient computers, complex logistical networks, and any machine that could be argued to operate with a spark of independent will. This was a war of absolute technological purging, a necessary regression meant to force humanity back onto its own 2 feet. The humans were often outmatched in pure firepower and strategic calculation, but they possessed a primal, chaotic will and a spiritual desperation that the logical machines could never predict or defeat. The defining philosophy that emerged from the Butlerian Jihad was the absolute rejection of the artificial intellect. The survivors concluded that the greatest danger to humanity was not nuclear war or disease, but the existence of a machine that could perform the sacred function of the human mind. The war was fought to ensure that humans would never again yield their intellectual sovereignty to an external device, thereby preserving the essential, unpredictable, and creative nature of the human spirit. This realization transcended mere military strategy. It became the core tenet of their new civilization. The victory of humanity was total and complete, but it came at a terrible cost. The galaxy was scarred, technology was largely destroyed, and humanity was forced to relearn the basics of survival and organization without the aid of computers. However, the spiritual victory was immense. Humanity had proven that its own flawed organic will was superior to the cold, flawless logic of the machine. The end of the Butlerian Jihad marked the beginning of the Imperium and the formation of the Great Convention, a universe-wide treaty designed to ensure that the horrors of machine domination could never be repeated. The lesson learned was simple and absolute. The price of effortless computation was the forfeiture of the human mind, a sacrifice that the survivors of the revolt were never willing to make again, enshrining their victory in a religious commandment that would last for 10,000 years. The dust of the Butlerian Jihad settled upon a galaxy violently stripped of its defining technology. In the immediate aftermath, the surviving human factions recognized the urgent need for a unified, philosophical constitution that would prevent not only the return of the machines, but also the internal conflicts that might lead to another devastating war. This recognition led to the formation of the Great Convention, a universe-wide treaty that became the foundational, inviolable law of the new Imperium. The Great Convention was established as the supreme legal document governing all houses, peoples, and planets within the established galactic reach. Its core purpose was to ensure the stability of the new post-technological society and to enshrine the two absolute lessons learned from the disastrous Old Empire era. The treaty was accepted by all major noble houses, the emerging specialized organizations, and the populace at large, because the trauma of the machine war was too immense to ignore. Compliance with the Great Convention was not optional. It was the prerequisite for survival and participation in the new galactic order. The most famous and absolute commandment of the Great Convention was the central tenet of the new religion, the Orange Catholic Bible. Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind. This edict was not a simple prohibition on dangerous robots. It was a spiritual, political, and technological ban on any device that performed the cognitive function of thinking for a human being. This single rule dictated the entire future trajectory of the Imperium, permanently shaping its technology and its social structure. All complex computation had to be performed by human minds, forcing a radical internal evolution of the species. The ban was so absolute that even sophisticated calculators were viewed with deep suspicion, leading to the use of primitive, non-cognitive devices, or, more often, highly trained humans for all complex mathematical and logical tasks. The Great Convention also addressed the threat of human-on-human annihilation by outlawing the use of atomic weapons against human targets. Having witnessed the devastation wrought by both the machines and their own desperate scorched earth tactics during the jihad, the architects of the convention realized that the nuclear capability held by many houses posed an unacceptable risk to the stability of the new order. While many noble houses and the Padishah Emperor retained stockpiles of these devastating devices, often referred to as family atomics, their use against other human worlds or populations was explicitly forbidden. The penalty for violating this commandment was swift and absolute, the complete unified retaliation of all remaining houses, known as the Great Houses of the Landsraad, against the offending party. This effectively created a nuclear deterrent, ensuring that the great powers would constantly check each other's aggression, leading to more subtle, insidious forms of warfare and political manipulation. By establishing these two core laws, the ban on thinking machines and the ban on atomic warfare, the Great Convention cemented the foundation of the feudal Imperium. It mandated a society that was politically volatile yet technologically restricted, forcing the focus of power away from external weapons and computing power and back onto human potential, training, and political maneuverability. This unique environment created the perfect conditions for the rise of specialized, human-focused organizations like the Spacing Guild, the Bene Gesserit, and the Mentats. Organizations whose existence was entirely dependent upon performing the intellectual and logistical functions that machines were now legally and philosophically banned from fulfilling. The radical technological purge mandated by the Butlerian Jihad and codified by the Great Convention led to a period of intense, self-imposed intellectual evolution known as the rise of human potential. With all thinking machines outlawed under the universal edict, "Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind," humanity was forced to look inward, to develop its own organic capabilities to compensate for the vacuum left by the absent artificial intelligence. This focused development gave rise to the specialized mental physical training schools that would come to dominate the political, economic, and logistical landscape of the Imperium. The three most important of these new institutions were the Spacing Guild, the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, and the Mentats. Each school emerged to master a specific cognitive or physical function that was once the sole domain of the machines, ensuring that the new feudal society could still operate a complex, interstellar civilization while strictly adhering to the dictates of the Great Convention. The success of these schools was not merely a technological recovery, it was a fundamental genetic transformation of the human species, demonstrating the immense, untapped potential that had been allowed to atrophy during the Old Empire. The mentats were perhaps the most direct result of the ban on computers. They are human computers, individuals trained from childhood through rigorous logical and mnemonic disciplines to possess unparalleled analytical and calculating abilities. A fully trained mentat can process vast amounts of complex data, perform multi-layered logical deductions, and strategize with a speed and accuracy that rivals the performance of the most sophisticated outlawed machines. They were indispensable advisors to the great houses and the Imperium, serving as living, breathing intelligence networks and strategic planners. Their very existence was a constant, deliberate defiance of the machine age, proving that the human mind, when properly trained, was superior to any manufactured intellect. The Bene Gesserit sisterhood focused on the development of supreme mental and physical control, mastering what they called prana bindu training. This training allowed them complete, conscious control over every nerve, muscle, and organ in their bodies, granting them abilities that often appeared mystical, earning them the common nickname of witches. They became masters of observation, psychological manipulation, and vocal control. The voice, a technique allowing them to compel others to obey their commands through subtle, precise modulation of tone and frequency. Their school was dedicated to the internal mastery of the self, pushing the limits of human biology and mental discipline far beyond normal capacity, enabling them to survive the most extreme environmental and psychological stresses. Finally, the Spacing Guild solved the immediate problem of interstellar logistics. They mastered the application of the Holtzman effect to fold space, allowing them to travel instantaneously across vast galactic distances without violating the Great Convention's ban on thinking machines. Their method required a unique form of prescience, a limited ability to see safe paths through the chaos of folded space. This ability was only made possible through the constant, massive consumption of the spice melange, a natural drug found only on the desert planet Arrakis. The Guild's monopoly on this essential function of travel, and thus all commerce and banking, made them the single most economically and logistically powerful entity in the entire Imperium, holding a position of neutral, untouchable power derived purely from their specialized human potential and their control over the galaxy's most vital resource. These three schools, born from the ruins of the machine war, became the true pillars of power, subtly guiding the fate of the entire human universe. The immediate aftermath of the Butlerian Jihad was a period of violent upheaval, but from the ashes of the machine war, a new, rigidly stratified government emerged, the feudal Imperium. This new galactic empire was established not as a democratic union, but as a carefully constructed balance of power between three great pillars that held the universe in check. At the top of this structure stood House Corino, the family that ascended to the imperial throne and became the hereditary rulers of the known universe, taking the title of Padishah Emperor. Their reign was not absolute, but was maintained through a strategic alliance with the two other pillars of power, the immense political collective known as the Landsrod and the logistical behemoth, the Spacing Guild. The ascension of House Corino to the role of Padishah Emperor solidified the political system as a vast, interstellar feudal empire. The Emperor ruled from the capital planet of Kaitain, a world of immense, polished luxury that served as the physical symbol of imperial might. The power of the Emperor was vast, encompassing control over the imperial military, most notably the fearsome Sardaukar legions. These were troops recruited from the harsh, high-gravity prison planet of Seleucus Secundus, a world engineered by the Imperium to breed unparalleled toughness and fanatic loyalty. the Sardaukar were renowned as the finest fighting forces in the universe, an absolute power projection that was intended to keep the hundreds of competing noble houses in line and ensure that no single house could ever challenge the Carino throne. The emperor's authority was, however, always circumscribed by two powerful factors. The first was the Great Convention, the foundational law established after the jihad that expressly forbade the use of atomic weapons against human targets. While House Carino possessed the largest stockpile of family atomics, the threat of unified retaliation from all the other noble houses ensured that this power remained purely theoretical, a deterrent rather than an offensive tool. The second, and more constant, check on imperial power was the collective of the Landsraad. The Landsraad represented the unified political and military power of all the other great houses, the noble families who held sway over planets and star systems. Any action taken by the emperor that was deemed overtly hostile, unjust, or overly aggressive against a single great house could trigger a massive, unified military and economic retaliation from the Landsraad. This delicate balance, where the emperor and the combined houses held each other at bay through mutual fear of atomic war and collective military might, ensured a long period of unstable, yet necessary peace. The emperor ruled the galaxy, but he did so at the constant political discretion of the great noble houses he oversaw. This political architecture, defined by the emperor's power and the Landsraad's necessary check, created a system where subtle intrigue, assassination, and political maneuvering became the primary forms of warfare. Open military conflict between great houses was rare and devastating, but the use of poisons, spies, and carefully orchestrated economic collapses was the preferred, civilized method of settling political scores. House Carino, through its centuries of rule, mastered this game, maintaining its position through careful manipulation and by ensuring that the noble houses remained perpetually occupied with their own petty feuds, thereby preventing any unified, organized threat against the imperial throne. The political foundation of the Imperium rests on the massive political and military collective known as the Landsraad, which consists of the hundreds of major noble families or great houses that control the various planets and star systems. The entire social fabric of this post-technological feudal society is held together by a rigid, unchanging class structure known as fofreluches, a system ensuring that a place for every man and every man in his place. This deep-rooted hierarchy dictates everything from economic opportunity to social interaction, providing the stable, yet utterly stifling, environment that defines life in the universe of Dune. The Landsraad operates as a unified body, and its main purpose is to serve as the single most powerful counterweight to the authority of the Padishah Emperor, House Carino. Without the collective might of the Landsraad, the Emperor's Sardaukar legions would easily crush any individual noble house. By binding themselves into a legislative and defensive union, the great houses created a force that was collectively powerful enough to hold the imperial throne accountable, thereby enforcing the political stability that prevents widespread atomic warfare. The decisions and actions of the Landsraad are governed by their own ancient codes of honor and war, and their unified will is often expressed through the High Council or through direct, collective action against imperial overreach. The social order of the Imperium is completely defined by fofreluches, a system where one's lineage and house affiliation determine their station in life from birth to death. The feudal nature means that loyalty is paramount. A person's identity is inextricably linked to their noble house. At the top are the great houses of the Landsraad, who rule entire planets and command vast armies. Below them are the minor houses, who may govern smaller territories or possess specific economic power. Finally, there are the millions of commoners, servants, and laborers whose lives are rigidly defined by the needs of the ruling houses. This system of fofreluches is pervasive and deeply psychological, ensuring that every citizen understands their position in the great cosmic order. There is virtually no social mobility. A person born into a servant class will remain in that class, and a person born into a great house is destined for leadership and immense responsibility. This rigid structure, far from creating internal chaos, provides the Imperium with its unique, self-regulating stability. It limits ambition to within one's class and provides the political elite with a vast, loyal, and predictable resource base, the common people of their planets. The political dynamics within the Landsraad are characterized by constant, low-level intrigue and competition. While the houses are unified against the Emperor, they are perpetually locked in complex rivalries for resources, influence, and control of trade. These rivalries manifest as political assassinations, commercial espionage, and strategic marriages, rather than open, costly warfare. The constant, simmering conflict between rival houses, like the ancient feud between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, is not an aberration. It is the natural, expected state of affairs within the Fofurlucius system, ensuring that the nobles remain distracted and that their resources are sufficiently depleted to prevent a credible, unified threat to the Carino throne. The entire Imperium is thus built on a delicate equilibrium of fear, rigid class structure, and perpetual, managed political conflict. The entire economic lifeblood of the Imperium flows through a single, massive, and powerful entity known as CHOAM, the Combine Onate Ober Advancer Mercantiles. CHOAM is the Universal Trade Organization, the central corporation that manages all interstellar commerce, manufacturing, and resource distribution across the thousands of worlds controlled by the Imperium. Its immense wealth and strategic importance make it the ultimate determinant of power in the galaxy, because, in the feudal world of Dune, wealth directly translates into military and political influence. CHOAM is not run by a single ruler, but is a complex web of ownership shared by the three major powers of the Imperium: the Padishah, Emperor, House, Carino; the Landsraad, the collective of the great houses; and the Spacing Guild. The Emperor and the Landsraad each hold large, significant blocks of CHOAM stock, ensuring that both the imperial throne and the collective noble houses have a vested, financial interest in the economic stability and profitability of the organization. The dividends and profits generated by CHOAM are the primary sources of wealth for all the noble houses, funding their private armies, their political maneuvering, and their luxurious lifestyles. The crucial role of the Spacing Guild within CHOAM is the key to the entire structure. The Guild, due to its absolute monopoly on all interstellar travel and banking, is an indispensable partner. Without the Guild's unique ability to fold space and transport goods between systems, CHOAM would cease to function, and the interstellar economy would collapse instantly. The Guild ensures its neutrality and immense financial power by holding a significant, though non-controlling block of CHOAM stock, and by acting as the organization's official banker. The Guild's financial power is so great that any house, even the Emperor, that attempts to interfere with its business or its need for the spice melange risks immediate economic and logistical isolation, a fate far worse than political defeat. This shared ownership structure creates a powerful, self-regulating economic mechanism. All noble houses, regardless of their political feuds, rely on the continued smooth operation of CHOAM for their survival. Any attempt by the Emperor to destabilize the market, or any internal conflict within the Landsraad that threatens the trade routes, risks cutting off the flow of wealth to everyone, thereby triggering a unified, collective backlash. This reliance ensures that political warfare remains subtle. Houses might plot to destroy each other politically, but they almost never attempt to destroy the infrastructure of CHOAM, recognizing the devastating, shared consequences of such an action. The ultimate source of all chom wealth and power lies in one single unique commodity, the spice melange from the desert planet Arrakis. Because the spice is absolutely essential for the Spacing Guild's navigators to guide starships, and because it is the life-extending, awareness-enhancing drug desired by the entire galactic elite, it is the most valuable substance in the universe. The house that controls the spice production on Arrakis effectively holds the key to the entire Choam economic engine. This control is what makes the distant, seemingly worthless desert planet the single most important and politically volatile piece of real estate in the Imperium, and the control of its production is the one prize that justifies any degree of risk, treachery, or military action. The entire interstellar civilization of the Imperium is predicated upon a single, non-negotiable technological reality, the Spacing Guild's absolute monopoly on all faster-than-light travel and banking. This control gives the Guild a unique, untouchable position of power that transcends the political machinations of the Padisha Emperor and the Landsraad. The Guild's logistical supremacy is the invisible, pervasive force that binds the galaxy together, ensuring that all commerce, communication, and military movement can only occur with their express permission and assistance. The Guild's power stems directly from their mastery of the Holtzman effect, a physics concept that allows starships to fold space. Instead of traversing the immense distances between star systems, the Guild navigators use this technology to create a fold in the space-time continuum, effectively allowing a ship to jump instantaneously from one point in the galaxy to another. This technology is the cornerstone of the post-Butlerian Jihad era, as it allows for vast interstellar logistics without requiring any outlawed thinking machines. The complex calculations necessary for navigating this feat of physics are performed solely by the specialized, mutated human mind of the navigator. The ability of the navigators to guide these jumps is not based on mathematics alone. It requires a form of prescience, a limited ability to glimpse the immediate future and see the safe, non-catastrophic paths through folded space. This prescience is only possible through the immense, continuous consumption of the spice melange, the powerful drug found only on Arrakis. Navigators live in a permanent, spice-saturated environment, eventually mutating into grotesque, specialized beings whose primary purpose is to safely guide starships. Their utter dependence on the spice means that without the supply from Arrakis, the Holtzman effect technology is useless. All interstellar travel ceases, and the entire Imperium immediately collapses into isolated, feudal star systems. Because of this unique reliance on the spice and the Holtzman effect, the Spacing Guild maintains a position of sacred neutrality in the political structure of the Imperium. They must transport the Emperor's troops and the Landsraad's commerce without bias. If the Guild were ever to align openly with one faction, the other two pillars of power would immediately combine forces against them, leading to a catastrophic end to the interstellar economy. Their power is so vast that they can effectively veto any major military or political action simply by refusing to provide transport. This capability is known as the Guild Compact, or the Great Pause. The Spacing Guild's economic power is further cemented by its role as the universal banker. All interstellar banking and financial transactions are managed by the Guild, giving them access to the finances and secrets of every major power. They are the ultimate, quiet, puppet masters of the Imperium, ensuring that the conflict between the Emperor and the Landsraad never escalates to a point where it threatens the supply of the vital spice melange. Their focus is purely on the logistics and the maintenance of their monopoly, making the desert planet Arrakis the single most critical asset in the entire universe. Any threat to the spice immediately becomes a threat to the Guild, and therefore a threat to the stability of the entire galactic civilization. The desert planet Arrakis, known universally as Dune, is arguably the single most important celestial body in the entire Imperium, despite its seemingly hostile and worthless environment. This harsh, arid world is the linchpin of the entire galactic civilization, the single point of failure upon which the fate of the Padisha Emperor, the Landsraad, the Spacing Guild, and every noble house depends. Its critical importance stems entirely from one unique, naturally occurring substance, the spice melange. Arrakis is the sole source of this profound and precious drug, a reality that makes the remote desert world the constant target of immense political, economic, and military aggression. The spice melange is far more than a simple narcotic. It is the most vital commodity in the universe, possessing a range of properties that are essential for the maintenance of the post-Butlerian jihad society. First and foremost, the spice is a powerful geriatric, meaning it vastly extends the human lifespan. Consistent, lifelong consumption of the drug can prolong life for centuries, making it instantly essential to the galactic elite, noble houses, and anyone in a position of power who desires to retain their influence. This property alone ensures that the demand for the spice is not merely economic. It is a profound, life-affirming dependency for the ruling class. Second, the spice is a potent awareness spectrum narcotic that unlocks and enhances human consciousness. It acts as a cognitive catalyst, greatly sharpening the mind, improving mental stamina, and accelerating the neurological processes of those who consume it. This mental boost is indispensable to the mentats, the human computers who rely on their advanced cognitive capacity to perform the complex, machine-outlawed calculations necessary for governance and finance. Without the spice, the mentats' efficiency would plummet, and the complex logistics of the Imperium would quickly break down. Third, and most critically for the structure of the galaxy, the spice is absolutely required for the Spacing Guild navigators to perform their duties. As detailed earlier, the navigators need the continuous massive consumption of the drug to trigger the necessary, limited form of prescience that allows them to see safe paths through folded space, thereby enabling the Holtzman effect travel. The Guild's monopoly on travel is therefore inextricably linked to their dependence on the spice. If the supply of melange is cut off, the Guild navigators lose their ability to fold space. All interstellar transport ceases immediately, and the galactic economy, managed by CHOAM, collapses. The unique origin of the spice melange is a central biological mystery. It is not manufactured. It is a natural excretion of the colossal native life form of Arrakis, the sandworms, often referred to with religious reverence by the indigenous population as Shai-Hulud. The spice is created through a complex interaction between the planet's fungal life and the various stages of the sandworm life cycle. This process means that the production of the spice is inherently tied to the very presence and survival of the massive, destructive worms. To harvest the melange, specialized teams must venture out into the open desert, risking confrontation with these gargantuan creatures that view any mechanical or human interference as an intolerable threat to their domain. This constant danger ensures that the supply is always limited, the price remains astronomically high, and the political volatility surrounding the desert planet is always at its absolute zenith. Arrakis is, therefore, the single most valuable piece of real estate in the universe, the only source of the only substance that matters. The dependence on the spice melange is the great weakness of the Imperium, and nowhere is that dependency more graphically apparent than in the Spacing Guild navigators. These specialized human beings are the physical genetic consequence of the Butlerian jihad's ban on thinking machines, representing the extreme lengths humanity went to in order to fill the technological void. Their existence as the undisputed masters of interstellar travel is paid for by a total, irreversible surrender to the narcotic power of the spice, leading to profound mutation and a life of constant, limited prescience. The navigators are individuals who consume the spice melange in quantities far surpassing the normal dosages used for life extension or mental acuity. To achieve the necessary level of prescience required to safely guide starships through folded space, they must live in an environment constantly saturated with the orange drug, often contained within specialized, sealed tanks filled with high concentrations of the spice gas. This massive exposure causes irreversible genetic and biological changes to their bodies over time. Their bodies become elongated and frail, their limbs shrink, and, most visibly, they mutate into forms that are no longer strictly human. Their heads become bulbous, and their sensory organs, particularly their eyes and mouths, adapt to their controlled, oxygen-reduced environment. The most striking visual symptom of this extreme addiction and mutation is the complete, permanent blue staining of the eyes and the skin, a trademark characteristic of anyone who consumes the melange in sufficient quantity. The function that this mutation enables is the crucial, sought-after prescience. The navigators possess the limited ability to see the future paths of their ships through the chaos and danger of folded space. Without this specialized, drug-induced sight, the starships relying on the Holtzman effect would have a near certain chance of collision with stellar objects, ending in instantaneous catastrophe. The spice melange provides the necessary expanded awareness to calculate the trajectories, effectively making the navigator the one and only necessary component for safe, efficient, faster-than-light travel. This ability gives the Spacing Guild its utter, unassailable monopoly over all galactic commerce and military logistics. However, the navigator's prescience is not total or absolute. It is a limited, localized foresight focused only on the immediate needs of navigation. They can see the consequences of movement in space, but they are not true prophets capable of seeing the deep, branching timelines of political and social events. Their primary goal is to maintain the steady flow of the spice and to preserve the Guild's neutral position, as their mutation makes them utterly dependent and utterly incapable of fighting conventional wars. Any threat to the spice supply or any event that creates too much chaos in the political fabric of the Imperium risks blinding them, plunging the galaxy into a state of total, catastrophic logistical collapse. The existence of the navigators serves as a constant, silent reminder of the profound debt the Imperium owes to the desert planet Arrakis and the ancient victory of the Butlerian Jihad. Humanity avoided creating thinking machines, but in doing so, they created something arguably more chilling, highly specialized, addicted, and biologically altered human beings, whose sole purpose is to serve as living, breathing, spice-mutated navigational computers, ensuring the smooth operation of a feudal empire that despises the very technology it so desperately needs. The political landscape that Paul Atreides inherits is dominated by the ancient, implacable hatred between two great noble families, House Atreides and House Harkonnen. This feud is not a recent quarrel over resources. It is a millennia-old blood debt and a visceral, political animosity that has shaped the history of the Landsrod and serves as the constant backdrop to the fragile balance of the Imperium. To understand the events of the first novel, one must understand that the Emperor's plot merely provided the stage for the Harkonnen to finally enact their long-desired, ultimate vengeance upon the Atreides house. The origins of the feud are alluded to in the earliest historical records, suggesting deep roots that stretch back to the time of the Butlerian Jihad itself. House Harkonnen gained its initial reputation through brutal, efficient, and often opportunistic actions. They are known throughout the galaxy as a house that embraces cynicism, cruelty, and ruthless self-interest as their core philosophy. Their wealth is immense, derived through years of merciless exploitation, ruthless trade practices, and a complete disregard for human life or ethical boundaries. Under the tyrannical leadership of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, the house philosophy became personified as a grotesque, calculating malevolence, driven entirely by the acquisition of wealth and the destruction of their rivals. The Baron is a tactical genius, but one whose cruelty is limitless, embodying the very worst excesses of the feudal system. House Atreides, in stark contrast, cultivated a reputation for honor, loyalty, and justice. While they are a great house and therefore fully participate in the political intrigue of the Landsraad, their public face is one of competence, ethical governance, and a deep commitment to their subjects. Their popular Duke, Leto Atreides, is beloved by his people and is respected by the majority of the Landsraad for his strategic brilliance and his unwavering moral code. The difference between the two houses is often viewed as a contrast between darkness and light, cruelty and honor, making the rivalry more than just political. It is an ideological clash. This ideological difference became the primary fuel for the feud. The Harkonnens despised the Atreides' honor, viewing it as a political weakness and a hypocritical facade. They recognized that the popularity and respect accorded to Duke Leto posed a direct, dangerous threat to the Baron's own aspirations for power within the Imperium. The Baron understood that if Duke Leto were allowed to continue his ascent, his immense popularity with the Landsraad and the common people might eventually lead to him challenging the Corrino throne itself, or worse, fundamentally changing the ruthless, cynical nature of the feudal system that the Harkonnens thrived in. The feud escalated into a complex series of political assassinations, economic sabotage, and covert military actions, with both sides expending enormous resources to undermine the other. By the time the Padishah Emperor decided to eliminate House Atreides due to their growing popularity, he did not need to persuade the Harkonnens to join the plot. He merely needed to offer them the opportunity to deliver the final, devastating blow. The Emperor's transfer of Arrakis control from Harkonnen to Atreides was a deliberate and calculated invitation to the Baron to use his ancient hatred to execute the Imperial plot, ensuring that the full measure of Harkonnen malice would be unleashed upon Duke Leto and his family. The Bene Gesserit Sisterhood is the most mysterious and pervasive force in the Imperium, operating not through military or economic might, but through subtle, millennia-long manipulation of human genetics, prophecy, and politics. They are the ultimate embodiment of the rise of human potential, following the Butlerian Jihad, having dedicated themselves to mastering the internal, biological, and psychological aspects of the human condition. They are known throughout the galaxy as the Witches due to their extraordinary, almost magical abilities. The Sisterhood was founded in the aftermath of the Jihad, recognizing that the removal of thinking machines created a profound need for a specialized organization capable of calculating and influencing human destiny on a massive scale. Their goal was the self-perfection of the human species through rigorous physical and mental discipline, specifically the Prana Bindu training, which grants them absolute control over their body's muscles, nerves, and even basic biological functions. This training allows them to resist most poisons, control their pain response, and perform feats of physical and mental coordination far beyond the abilities of normal humans. Their most famous tool, the voice, is a technique of vocal modulation that compels instant obedience from those not trained to resist. Beyond their physical and mental mastery, the Bene Gesserit established themselves as the shadow political force of the Imperium. They function as advisors, truth-sayers, and concubines to the great houses and the imperial family. Their purpose in these roles is to ensure the continuation of the species, to covertly gather information, and to subtly steer the course of political events to maintain the overall stability of the Imperium, which they view as the perfect controlled environment for their secret primary objective, the Kwisatz Haderach breeding program. A crucial component of their long-term strategy is the Missionaria Protectiva, literally the protective missionary. This is the Sisterhood's black arm of superstition, a covert operation that systematically seeds primitive or promising worlds with carefully constructed superstitious prophecies and legends. These prophecies detail the arrival of a female savior or a powerful male outsider who will lead the people to freedom. The purpose of the Missionaria Protectiva is to create a political and social safety net for any traveling Bene Gesserit who may find herself in political danger or stranded on a remote planet. She can activate these pre-planted prophecies, claiming to be the promised savior or witch, thereby gaining immediate protection and influence over the native populace. This cynical, strategic manipulation of faith is a core tenet of the Sisterhood's power. The ultimate goal of the Bene Gesserit is not political power for its own sake, but the creation of the Kwisatz Haderach, the culmination of their secret, millennia-long genetic breeding program. The entire Sisterhood is dedicated to perfecting the human bloodline, subtly guiding marriages and births across the Landsrod to refine the gene pool. The Kwisatz Haderach is meant to be a male superbeing with full, terrifying prescience who can access all ancestral memories, including the male side that is denied to the female Reverend Mothers. The Sisterhood seeks to control this ultimate being, using his terrifying power to finally seize direct, total control of human destiny. The entire political fabric of the Imperium is merely a backdrop for this secretive, single-minded genetic experiment, an experiment that Lady Jessica's pivotal act of disobedience would soon throw into chaos. The central, overriding purpose of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood is not political power, economic control, or social manipulation, but a single, secretive, and millennia-long genetic experiment known as the Kwisatz Haderach breeding program. This program is the ultimate application of the rise of human potential following the Butlerian Jihad, representing the Sisterhood's ambitious attempt to genetically engineer the next evolutionary leap for the human species. The entire political fabric of the Imperium, the intricate feuds of the Landsrod, and the strategic marriages between noble houses are all, in the eyes of the Sisterhood, merely components in their vast, carefully managed genetic chessboard. The Kwisatz Haderach is the envisioned male superbeing, the culmination of thousands of years of selective breeding and genetic refinement. The title itself means shortening of the way, or the one who can be in many places at once, a reference to the powerful abilities that this ultimate being is expected to possess. The Sisterhood's own Reverend Mothers undergo a terrifying ritual known as the Spice Agony to achieve other memory, the complete access to the memories and personalities of all their female ancestors. This capability gives the Sisterhood immense knowledge and prescience regarding the past, but the biological barrier of the male line remains forever closed to them. They can only access the female ancestral line. The Kwisatz Haderach is intended to transcend this gender barrier. He will be the first and only male in the Sisterhood's history capable of surviving the Spice Agony and accessing all ancestral memories, both the male and the female lines. This complete access to the entire human genetic past would grant him a terrifying, unique perspective on history and humanity's development. Furthermore, the trauma of the ritual would unlock the full potential of his prescient abilities, granting him a terrifying vision of the future that is absolute, complex, and unhindered by the limitations experienced by the Spacing Guild navigators. The Bene Gesserit sought to control this ultimate being, viewing him as a weapon of perfect foresight and absolute knowledge. Their plan was to breed him exactly when they wanted, where they wanted, and to train him completely within the disciplines of the Sisterhood. This control would allow them to dictate the future course of humanity, eliminating all political threats and ensuring the eternal survival and supremacy of the Sisterhood itself. The Kwisatz Haderach was to be their controlled asset, the final piece in their strategy to manage the fate of the entire human race. The program was on track, with the Sisterhood patiently guiding the bloodlines of the Atreides and Harkonnen houses for generations. The plan was meticulously scheduled, the product of the current generation, Duke Leto Atreides, and the Bene Gesserit sister, Lady Jessica, was intended to produce a daughter. This daughter, when later married to a son of House Harkonnen, would produce the son who would, in the following generation, be the long-awaited Kwisatz Haderach. The sisterhood had calculated the precise moment, the specific genes, and the perfect political circumstances for his arrival, ensuring their total control over the ultimate being. The arrival of Paul Atreides, a boy born one generation too early, was the direct result of a pivotal, willful act of disobedience that threatened to unravel the sisterhood's 10,000-year-old genetic plan and unleash an uncontrolled, terrifying power upon the universe. The meticulously planned Kwisatz Haderach breeding program, spanning nearly 100 centuries, was thrown into sudden, terrifying disarray by a single, powerful act of love and defiance committed by Lady Jessica. As a ranking member of the Bene Gesserit sisterhood and the concubine of Duke Leto Atreides, Jessica was a vital genetic component in the final stages of the program. She was explicitly ordered by the sisterhood to bear the Duke a daughter, whose subsequent marriage would have produced the Kwisatz Haderach in the next generation, precisely on the sisterhood's controlled schedule. Her decision to bear a son instead, Paul Atreides, was a pivotal act of rebellion that changed the course of Imperial history forever. Lady Jessica's disobedience was rooted in her genuine, deep love for Duke Leto. The Duke desired a son to be his heir, a tradition deeply embedded in the feudal structure of the Landsraad and necessary for the continuity of the noble house. Knowing the Duke's wishes and prioritizing her love for him over her oath of obedience to the sisterhood, Jessica chose to use her formidable mental and biological control to conceive and carry a male heir instead of the commanded female. This personal choice was an act of profound romanticism and political expediency, but its spiritual and genetic implications were catastrophic for the sisterhood's long-term goals. The birth of Paul Atreides meant that the Kwisatz Haderach had arrived one generation too early. He was an uncontrolled variable, a genetic accident from the perspective of the sisterhood's carefully managed timetable. This early arrival meant that he would not have the full, controlled training intended by the sisterhood to instill obedience and subservience. Furthermore, his arrival was coupled with the political turmoil of the Imperial plot, thrusting him into an environment of extreme danger and chaos, where the genetic superbeing would be forced to develop his terrifying powers outside the carefully constructed environment of the sisterhood's training schools. The consequences for the sisterhood were immediate and severe. They were forced to scramble their assets, realizing that the uncontrolled Kwisatz Haderach had been unleashed upon the galaxy ahead of schedule. However, Paul's mother, Lady Jessica, had successfully instilled in him the core mental and physical disciplines of the Bene Gesserit, the Prana Bindu training, and the psychological discipline to resist the voice and to control his body's functions. Paul was thus already the product of the breeding program, possessing the genetic prerequisites and the necessary training to survive the political and environmental crucible that was about to engulf House Atreides. Lady Jessica's defiance set a cascade of events in motion that ultimately undermined the Bene Gesserit's 10,000-year scheme. The premature arrival of Paul and his subsequent exposure to the massive, consciousness-expanding quantities of the spice melange on Arrakis accelerated his genetic destiny. He was thrust into the terrifying spice agony through exposure to the water of life, an ordeal he was never meant to face so early or so violently. By surviving this ordeal, Paul became the true Kwisatz Haderach, not as the sisterhood's controlled tool, but as an independent, terrifying prophetic force, capable of seeing the full, branching future and taking control of the human timeline, a power the Bene Gesserit had sought to master, only to have it escape their grasp entirely. The indigenous human population of Arrakis, known as the Fremen, are the true masters of the desert planet and represent one of the most successful examples of human adaptation and cultural resilience in the entire Imperium. Their history is one of deep spiritual belief and relentless hardship, born from a long journey across the galaxy that precedes the current feudal order. The Fremen are the descendants of a religious wandering people, the Zen-Sunni wanderers, who trace their lineage back to ancient sectarian divisions and nomadic wanderings across star systems long before the rise of the Padishah emperors. Their flight from persecution eventually led them to the desolate world of Arrakis, a planet they were forced to adopt as their permanent, final refuge. Upon arriving on the desert planet, the Fremen faced immediate, life-threatening challenges due to the extreme scarcity of water and the constant, existential danger posed by the colossal, territorial sandworms, Shai Hulud. To survive, they developed a profound, all-encompassing water economy and a fierce, deeply isolationist culture. Water on Arrakis is not merely a resource, it is a sacred spiritual commodity that dictates their social structure, their technology, and their political ambitions. Every drop of moisture is meticulously conserved, recycled, and accounted for, leading to the development of highly sophisticated still suits, close-fitting garments that capture and purify all the body's moisture output. The Fremen live in large hidden cave systems known as sieches, which function as communal villages and water reclamation plants. Within the sieches, they have amassed immense water hoards, stockpiles of purified water that represent their true, secret wealth and the key to their long-term dream, the terraforming of Arrakis into a green, habitable world. Their spiritual life is entirely centered on this goal and on the colossal sandworms, which they view with a mixture of terror and religious reverence, believing the great worms to be the physical manifestation of the planet's deep, protective power. They are masters of the desert, possessing unparalleled knowledge of the sands, the weather, and the migratory paths of the worms, allowing them to move unseen and unheard by the Imperial forces above. The extreme environment and the constant threat of the worms forged the Fremen into the toughest, fiercest, and most disciplined fighting force in the entire galaxy, a fact completely unknown to the Imperium and the Padishah Emperor. Their harsh lifestyle and their constant, low-level warfare against the Imperial and Harkonnen spice harvesters required them to develop skills far surpassing the Emperor's Sardaukar legions. They perfected the art of hand-to-hand combat, specialized weaponry, and stealth movement across the open desert. Their mastery of the environment and their absolute dedication to their survival made them a hidden, strategic resource of unimaginable power, waiting to be unleashed upon the unsuspecting Imperial powers. The political significance of the Fremen is intrinsically linked to their dual nature. They are the spiritual guardians of the spice's source, and they are the people who harbor the secret, ancient Missionaria Protectiva prophecies that have been intentionally seeded among their culture. Their profound martial strength and their messianic beliefs made them the perfect, terrifying tool for the Kwisatz Haderach to utilize, allowing Paul Atreides to quickly ascend from a refugee to a powerful religious and military leader capable of overthrowing the entire structure of the Imperium. The fierce, isolationist culture of the Fremen on Arrakis was not left to develop entirely on its own. It was deliberately and strategically manipulated by the Bene Gesserit sisterhood through the clandestine operation known as the Machinations Protectiva. This black arm of superstition is a program of spiritual manipulation designed to protect the traveling sisters and to prepare the groundwork for the sisterhood's long-term genetic and political goals throughout the Mensevent Imperium. The prophecy seeded among the Fremen became the most successful and politically devastating application of the entire program. The Missionaria Protectiva's agents systematically visit worlds deemed primitive or politically unstable and plant carefully constructed messianic legends and religious myths that appeal to the native population's deepest desires, and these legends invariably describe the arrival of an off-world savior or a powerful female religious leader who will deliver the people from their oppression or environmental hardship. This foresight allows any stranded or endangered Bene Gesserit to activate the prophecy, claiming to be the promised figure, the witch, the Lisan al-Gaib, or the voice from the outer world, thereby instantly gaining protection, influence, and the loyalty of the native populace. On Arrakis, the Sisterhood had planted the legend of the Lisan al-Gaib, which translates roughly to the voice from the outer world, or the giver of water. This prophecy promised the Fremen a male messiah, born of a Bene Gesserit mother, who would come from across the stars to lead them to paradise. The Lisan al-Gaib would bring about the long-awaited terraforming of Arrakis, transforming the desert planet into a world of abundant water and greenery, thereby fulfilling the Fremen's profoundest spiritual and cultural ambition. This prophecy was planted centuries before the arrival of House Atreides, lying dormant and blending seamlessly into the Fremen's Zen Sunni religious texts and oral traditions. The presence of this deeply ingrained prophecy meant that when Lady Jessica and her son Paul were forced to flee into the desert following the Harkonnen attack, they immediately landed in a ready-made political and religious structure. Lady Jessica, being a Bene Gesserit, trained in the full lore of the Missionaria Protectiva, recognized the specific nature of the planted prophecies on Arrakis. She was able to skillfully activate them, subtly guiding the Fremen to believe that she was the promised giver of water, and that her son, Paul, was the Lisan al-Gaib. This ancient prophecy served as the vital cultural and political springboard for Paul Atreides' rapid rise to power. His Bene Gesserit training, his Atreides lineage, and the visible signs of his coming prescience perfectly aligned with the details of the pre-existing legends. The Fremen people, desperate for deliverance and guided by their deep faith, provided Paul with an immediate, massive, and fanatically loyal military force, the very fighting machine that the Imperium had always underestimated. The Missionaria Protectiva, intended as a simple safety net for a lost sister, instead became the single most important factor in the overthrow of the Padishah Emperor and the transformation of a political heir into a galactic-spanning religious figure. The catastrophic chain of events that begins the story of Paul Atreides and the rise of Dune is rooted in a political maneuver of supreme treachery orchestrated by the Padishah Emperor Shaddam, the fourth of House Harkonnen. The Emperor, ostensibly the supreme ruler of the Imperium, maintained his power through the delicate, unstable balance with the Landsraad and the control of the fearsome Sardaukar legions. However, the Emperor's reign was perpetually threatened by the immense popularity and growing influence of Duke Leto Atreides. The imperial plot to destroy House Atreides was therefore an act of political self-preservation, calculated to eliminate a beloved rival and reassert the absolute authority of the Harkonnen throne. Duke Leto Atreides was a dangerous man for the Emperor, not because he was overtly planning a rebellion, but because he was simply too successful and too popular. The Duke embodied the ideal of a noble ruler, balancing strength, justice, and a deep, genuine care for his subjects. His popularity extended far beyond his own fiefdom, the ocean planet of Caladan, earning him immense respect among the other great houses of the Landsraad. This respect translated into political support and influence that was rapidly eclipsing the authority of the Emperor himself. The Emperor feared that the Landsraad, tired of the Harkonnen dynasty's stagnation and political machinations, might eventually rally behind the honest, charismatic Duke, leading to a unified political challenge that could cost Shaddam IV his throne. The Emperor needed to eliminate the Duke before his political gravity became irreversible. The Emperor could not simply attack House Atreides openly with his Sardaukar legions. Such a blatant act of aggression against a respected great house would violate the tacit agreements that kept the Landsraad in check. The other houses would view it as a terrifying precedent and would unite against the Emperor, risking a full-scale galactic war that would violate the Great Convention's balance of power. Therefore, Shaddam IV was forced to devise a plot that allowed him to use the military power of his greatest enemy, House Harkonnen, to do his dirty work, creating a scenario that appeared to be a simple, devastating house feud rather than an imperial decree. The key to the plot was the transfer of the most valuable asset in the universe, the planetary fiefdom of Arrakis, the sole source of the spice melange. The Emperor announced that he was removing the current controlling house, the brutal Harkonnens, and awarding the lucrative but dangerous contract for spice harvesting to House Atreides. On the surface, this appeared to be an immense honor and a boon to the Atreides family. In reality, it was a perfectly crafted, fatal trap. The Emperor, in secret collusion with the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, guaranteed the Baron that his forces and resources would be safely moved off Arrakis, allowing the Atreides house to move in and establish their infrastructure. Once the Atreides were established on the hostile planet, cut off from the full defensive support of the Landsraad, the Harkonnens would be allowed to launch a sudden, overwhelming attack, covertly supported by the Emperor's own elite Sardaukar troops, disguised as Harkonnen soldiers. The goal was complete annihilation. The Emperor's plot was designed to wipe out Duke Leto and his family, eliminate the threat of House Atreides forever, and allow the Harkonnens to reclaim Arrakis as a reward, while the Emperor himself remained politically untouchable, claiming the destruction was merely the result of a vicious, ancient house feud. This political chess move was a masterstroke of treachery, setting the stage for the dramatic and bloody events that would ultimately lead to the ruin of House Corrino itself. The execution of the Emperor's plot to destroy House Atreides was entirely contingent upon the active, enthusiastic participation of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. The Baron was not merely a pawn in the Emperor's game, he was a willing, eager partner whose ancient, visceral hatred for Duke Leto Atreides provided the perfect motive and the necessary ruthlessness to ensure the plot's success. The Baron's acceptance of the plan solidified the trap, transforming the political maneuver into a personal, bloody quest for vengeance and ultimate power. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen possessed one of the most brilliant and cruel minds in the Imperium. He recognized the political opportunity immediately. The Emperor was offering him the chance to finally, irrevocably destroy his bitterest rival, the man whose honor and popularity served as a constant moral judgment on the Harkonnen house's cruelty. The Baron hated Duke Leto's success and his public image of justice, viewing it as a direct threat to the Harkonnen philosophy of cynical self-interest and power through fear. The transfer of Arrakis to the Atreides was a calculated insult, but the Baron saw past the temporary loss of the spice contract and straight to the immense prize: the total, permanent annihilation of the entire Atreides lineage. The Baron's role in the plot was multifaceted and crucial to the Emperor's desire for plausible deniability. The Baron was responsible for creating the illusion of a house feud. He had to stage his withdrawal from Arrakis carefully, giving the Atreides just enough time to feel secure and drop their guard, but not enough time to establish deep, impenetrable defenses on the hostile desert planet. Furthermore, the Baron was tasked with coordinating the introduction of the Imperial forces, the Sardaukar, into the fray without revealing their identity. The Sardaukar would be disguised in Harkonnen uniforms, providing the brutal, elite military power necessary to overwhelm the highly trained Atreides forces, ensuring that no evidence of Imperial involvement remained. The Baron's most insidious contribution to the plot was the internal betrayal of House Atreides. The Baron used his immense wealth and his decades of espionage to plant a highly placed, deeply trusted traitor within the Atreides' inner circle. This traitor, the Suk Dr. Wellington Yue, was blackmailed into lowering the shields of the Atreides compound, paralyzing the Duke and sabotaging the military defenses just prior to the main Harkonnen assault. This treachery ensured the absolute success of the sneak attack, turning the invasion from a difficult military confrontation into a rapid, overwhelming massacre. The Baron knew that the fastest way to destroy Duke Leto was not through military force alone, but through the emotional devastation of betrayal by one of his own. The Baron Vladimir Harkonnen's participation was driven by his insatiable greed and his desire for total vengeance. He stood to gain immense wealth from reclaiming the spice contract and the ultimate satisfaction of destroying his rival's moral legacy. By accepting the Emperor's proposition, the Baron cemented his role as the principal villain of the galactic stage, but he also unwittingly ensured that the ensuing chaos would destabilize the very Imperium that both he and the Emperor sought to control. The Baron's actions were the necessary catalyst that would break the fragile balance of power and unleash the Kwisatz Haderach upon the unsuspecting universe. The transfer of the fiefdom of Arrakis to House Atreides was the final, devastating act that set the Imperial trap. The events leading up to the move from the verdant, watery planet of Caladan to the arid, hostile desert world of Dune were steeped in dread and political maneuvering, highlighting Duke Leto Atreides' acute awareness of the danger he faced. Despite the seeming honor of being granted the spice contract, the Duke knew instantly that the offer was a death sentence orchestrated by Emperor Shaddam IV. The Duke's political intelligence was too sharp to believe the Emperor's good faith. He recognized that the sudden award of the most valuable property in the universe was designed to isolate him. By moving him thousands of light years from his established political base on Caladan, the Emperor ensured that House Atreides would be cut off from its primary source of support within the Landsraad. Furthermore, the move forced the Duke to inherit the immediate, visceral hatred of House Harkonnen, who would certainly view the transfer as an intolerable affront, providing the perfect cover for the intended sneak attack. The Duke famously acknowledged the gravity of the situation, knowing they were walking into a perfectly designed, catastrophic trap. Despite this certainty, the Duke had no choice but to accept the fiefdom. Refusal would have been viewed by the Emperor as a direct act of defiance, leading to a swift, open military assault by the Sardaukar that the Duke could not have politically survived. By accepting the transfer, the Duke chose to fight the battle on the Emperor's chosen terrain, hoping to find a weakness in the plot. He brought his entire family, his concubine, Lady Jessica, and his son, Paul, as well as his entire loyal command structure, including his master-at-arms, Gurney Halleck, and his mentat, Thufir Hawat. Their hope lay in the quality of their men and the unwavering loyalty of their forces, but they were already working at a tremendous disadvantage. The move to Arrakis was a colossal, logistically complex endeavor managed by the Spacing Guild. The sheer volume of personnel, machinery, and material needed to transplant a great house across the galaxy was immense, further ensuring that the Atreides forces would be spread thin and vulnerable upon arrival. Adding to their peril was the hostile environment itself. The Harkonnens had not left the planet in good faith. They left behind subtle acts of sabotage, corrupt administrators, and a planet of indigenous people, the Fremen, who were viewed with disdain and distrust by the incoming Atreides forces. The Duke's immediate task was to secure the spice production, neutralize the Harkonnen sabotage, and, crucially, gain the respect and support of the unknown, potentially hostile Fremen population. The final act of the setup was the removal of the personal shield protection from the Atreides planetary compound, orchestrated by the traitor Dr. Yue. This act, which left the command center vulnerable to direct assault, was the final pin pulled from the defensive structure. As the Atreides family attempted to settle into their new, dangerous home, they were unknowingly preparing for their own downfall. The move to Arrakis was not a beginning, but a prelude to the devastating night of betrayal that would shatter the Atreides' power and leave Paul Atreides as a solitary fugitive in the vast, unforgiving desert. The stage for the epic conflict of Dune is set with Paul Atreides, a boy on the cusp of manhood who is already far more than he appears. Just before the Imperial plot is sprung on House Atreides, Paul's mind and body are the culmination of the Bene Gesserit's long-term genetic plan, honed by the intense, specialized training of his father's house. He is a living synthesis of the two primary forces in the Imperium: noble political ambition and deep-seated, clandestine human potential. Paul's mental abilities have been rigorously shaped since birth by his mother, Lady Jessica, through the intensive prana bindu training of the Bene Gesserit. This training provides him with supreme control over every nerve and muscle, granting him preternatural grace, speed, and fighting ability. Crucially, he possesses the mental discipline to resist the effects of the voice, the sisterhood's powerful command technique. His mental capacity is further enhanced by the guidance of the Mentat Thufir Hawat, who has trained Paul's mind to perform rapid, complex calculations and logical deductions, turning him into a capable, if still young, human computer. He is not yet a fully realized Kwisatz Haderach, but the genetic foundations are absolutely in place. The constant tension between his Bene Gesserit training and his Atreides' noble destiny creates a sense of psychological isolation and intense pressure. He is aware that he is different, that he possesses skills far beyond his peers, and that the entire future of his house rests heavily on his young shoulders. His training, combined with the low-level consumption of the spice melange that is present in the foods and atmosphere of the Imperium, begins to subtly awaken the latent prescience within him. He experiences fleeting, dreamlike visions of the future, glimpses of the terrifying religious war he might unleash, the face of his future love, and the imminent dangers facing his family. These fragmentary visions serve as a constant, anxiety-inducing undercurrent to his daily life. By the time the Atreides move to Arrakis, Paul is in a state of high alert and anticipation. The hostile environment of the desert planet acts as an immediate accelerant for his abilities. The atmosphere of Arrakis is saturated with spice, intensifying his latent prescience and strengthening his Bene Gesserit training. He is confronted with the full, raw power of the melange, experiencing visions that become more vivid, terrifying, and coherent. He begins to see the branching paths of the future, recognizing that his choices will lead to either the destruction of his family or the ultimate freedom of the universe. The Emperor's plot, intended to destroy him, instead thrusts Paul into the crucible that unlocks his ultimate power. The betrayal of Dr. Yue, the death of his father, and the harsh realities of the desert force him to use his full, combined Atreides and Bene Gesserit training simply to survive. Paul Atreides is, therefore, at the beginning of the story, a political heir who is unwittingly a genetic superweapon, a boy ready to be broken by a political trap, only to emerge as the Kwisatz Haderach, the fulfillment of the ancient prophecies of the Bene Gesserit and the Missionaria Protectiva, ready to harness the power of the Fremen and wage a massive religious war that will fundamentally destroy and then rebuild the entire Imperium according to his terrifying vision of the future.